Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us here at Warhammer today. We have a really exciting interview coming up with Georg Bobkov, previously finished second at the Clutch City Major. It is extremely creative, Emperor's Children, Death Guard, Slaanesh Demons, and Nurgle Demons Chaos Soup list. Listen, before we get started, please take a second to like and subscribe. We're pretty new to video creation, and every bit helps grow the channel and keep more of this amazing Warhammer content headed your way. And between the two of us, when you watch videos without liking and subscribing, it makes Bob the Bloodthirster really mad. And he's a Bloodthirster, okay? You don't want to see him when he gets mad. So with this cheesy plug out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right in to the interview.
I will say I've seen your name pop up plenty of times at high finishes of various events. And I think it's always been with Chaos. You're really someone that loves the faction and really knows work.
So basically, I'm full-blown Chaos player nowadays. I have started with like pure Slaanesh, and I know that it's always like easy to jump to other armies, but I try to focus. And I think the Chaos range usually gives you something that you can work with, although times are tough right now.
Yeah, that's one of the wonderful things about playing Chaos is there's so many little synergies, and I feel like even with like the codexes being years old, I feel like I'm still discovering new combos all the time. Can you talk a little bit about your 40K background, for example, like how long you've been playing, what army you started with, all that?
Okay, so I'm playing since like beginning of 2018, basically. So I have a bit of an odyssey, like also country-wise behind me. So I started playing in Edinburgh, so in Scotland.
Okay.
And played there for like a bit more than 1.5 years. And then I moved to Italy for a year, and then I arrived here in Houston. And since I arrived in Houston, it actually really picked up my competitive side of the playing. And I've always played Chaos. I basically got seduced by the first Heretic, and like in general, the ways how the different legions fell to Chaos. And as I said, I started out with being like pure Slaanesh and only focusing on that, especially enjoying like the speed and the options that you get just from that. And later on, I expanded more and more also into other legions or gods, basically. And yeah, since the last two elements, basically my least favorite god, Nurgle, was also included because the Daemon basically convinced me, because in my list for the Empire Central, I for the first time had like the Daemon in there, and having CP is just so good in our hands. And so yeah, this time there were a few more Nurgle models actually coming into the list, and I think now it's a real Chaos soup list. And yeah, but it's also really nice because it just provided me with like options that I've never had before and always wanted, like forward deployer, out of line of sight shooting is just something really nice to have.
No, it's fantastic because, as you say, like each of the gods, they have a certain play style, but when you get them all working together, it's really a beautiful thing. So let's talk. You actually talked about the Taliban. Let's start diving into the list, because I think you had a Slaanesh, an Emperor's Children battalion, a Nurgle spearhead, and a Demons patrol. Let's just quickly run through your list, if you can go about unit by unit and just kind of let everyone know, and then we'll kind of do more deep dive once we're through.
So basically, starting out with the battalion of Emperor's Children, it has like the blender per se. So that warlord is just amazing. The Master of Execution with the remnant of the Raymond Repulsive, and the Flames of Spite warlord trait is just bonkers, basically, when he goes off and when he's allowed to reroll. We come to that later. And then I have a sorcerer in there.
So actually, I just want to jump in very quickly and clarify for anyone that doesn't know how this combo works.
Okay, so
go ahead.
It's a Master of Execution, and his axe basically says that on every 6+2 wound, you do a mortal wound. Importantly, it's 6+, so you can bump that to 5+ with Veterans of the Long War. And in addition, there's also a warlord trait, Flames of Spite, which gives you the exact same effect. So also on a 6+2 wound, you get a mortal wound in addition to the normal damage. And at that moment, you would do 2 mortal wounds on every 5+ and 6+ if you're using veterans as well. And then the Raymond Repulsive is an awesome relic that allows you to reroll all hits, all wounds, and all charges. And at that moment, you basically, with Death to the Falls, everyone, if you've got pressions off, even better. You roll, you see how many 6s do I have, then you decide how many of my other rolls do I want to re-roll. So usually you come out with like between 7 and 9 hits.
Yeah.
And then you basically fish for 5s and 6s. So you re-roll everything that is not a 5 or 6, because at that moment at strength 8 and +1 to wound, he's wounding everything apart from T8 on 2s.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not uncommon that he does something like 10, 12, 14, 16 mortal wounds in addition. It's just amazing, basically.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're always complaining that we are playing with an 8th edition codex. I think it's also sometimes a benefit that we are playing with an 8th edition codex, because this will most likely not stay the way it is.
And so, I am curious, did the interaction with excess of violence ever come up where you can kill like 10 or 12 models and make additional attacks?
Yes. So I'm not exactly sure. So when you look at the wording exactly, it says that for every attack that kills something, you can get an extra attack. So I'm always very careful that I'm not getting more attacks than I had in the first place. But it actually came up only in one game, which was my first one against Thousand Suns, where he went into 8 remaining Terminators.
Oh, yeah.
And he picked them up completely because of excess of violence.
That was exactly
like another.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely nice. I mean, it's really, really nice into like something Horde. My dream scenario is still that he's going into like 2 units of 20 AdMech infantry close to each other. And he's saying like 3 attacks here, 3 attacks here. And on average, if you're not like missing hits at the initial stage, you basically pick up 14 plus, and not unlikely that you pick up the whole unit, which is ridiculous.
No, for sure.
I mean, 65 points. He's way too cheap for what he can do. But it's only in this particular layout he's actually really able to do stuff.
Yeah, and that's tough because in other legions like Iron Warriors, for example, there's like nothing going on for him at all.
Yeah, no.
That's really interesting. Then you had the Sorcerer next, right? And what psychic powers did you give him?
So warp time and prescience, basically. So prescience, I would say, is the key power that Chaos Space Marines have.
Yeah.
So I have actually I have a few demon characters as well. So I quite often went for psychic secondaries, and I even do it sometimes if there is a deny or a deny with +1 or whatever. Because for me, quite often getting prescience through undisturbed is more important than actually getting 3 points. Because if I get prescience on my units, then they can really do what they need to do. And that might be sometimes more important. Yeah, I mean, if you can stay out of deny range, that's even better. So I always try that first. Second would be like, okay, can I use some other spells to kind of bait out the deny before I need to use it for prescience? And at that moment, it's also, psychic secondaries is just the easiest way to ask, do you want to deny that or not? And then usually people just say like, yeah, of course I try to.
Yeah.
And then prescience is free. Warp time is more like a utility spell when you needed a bit more movement or so. And also for like the Master of Execution, because he's only moving 6 inches. If it's like turn 4 or so, and he really needs to go somewhere, and it is unfortunately 15 inches away or so, a nice warp time can help that a lot.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is because people always think of Honor the Prince as good for deep strike charges. That's still very good on the board. So often you'll have a situation where with Honor the Prince, like the math is insane. Like a 9 or 10 inch charge is super reliable with the reroll.
Yeah.
So you can basically move from 6, double move from yeah, go ahead.
I mapped it out basically. So I think normally it is because you can also spend a reroll on your charge roll. So you basically need roll 4 dice and you need at least a 3 if you come in from reserves. And this is something like a 98% or chance that it's actually going through. And it happened to me one single time, not in this tournament, that I actually was not able to get in. But now for the Tau matchup, they have a lot of like -2 movement stratagems, 2 to be precise. And so even with like an 11-inch charge, if you have the 2 CP, if necessary, it's still like an 80% chance that you can make it, which is ridiculous in comparison to everybody else that tries to go in against Tau, basically.
No, it's absolutely amazing. Cool. So I love that. I love that tech choice. Now I'll quickly cut to the troop choice where you had 3 times 10 cultists. I did have to ask because I saw there was 1 heavy stubber in there. Is that just at 5 points, or is that like a special character?
I had 8 points basically left over, and for 8 points, unfortunately, I was not able to buy another Thunderhammer because that would be 9 points. I was not able to buy another Fury because that would have been 9 points. And so in the end, I had a heavy stubber on one of my cultist units and a Stormbolter on my Sorcerer, and I have not used either the whole time, but I had a nicely rounded 2,000 point list. So it was only for that, basically.
Cool. I literally penciled in my notes, ask if the heavy stubber killed anything, but sounds like it was just not even worth firing.
I fired him
once. Or hiding them probably anyway.
I fired him once, and yeah, he didn't kill anything, unfortunately.
Right. Cool. So cultist heavy stubbers are not the way forward for chaos.
In general, I don't shoot my cultists unless I'm really desperate or I'm like facing something like Furies, for example. Anything that is like a T3 and 5+ armor or something like this. Yeah, okay, maybe.
No, that's fair.
Otherwise, it's usually just a waste of time.
Exactly, yeah, especially when you're playing on the clock. I did have one play where I had a cultist Tide of Traders one time. I was facing the Necrons, and they had like a 4 wound HQ, the 4-up save. The cultist went in there, Tide of Trader. They shot twice with vets, a lot of CP, but we killed a random HQ holding objective. Yeah, probably not even worth shooting 99% of the time.
So no. I was hoping in my game that was streamed. We were kind of joking because a 1 wounded Achilles went into a unit of 10 cultists. Wow. And he has like 5 attacks. And so he munched 5 cultists. And then these other 5 cultists would go out, and I told him they will be fearless if they manage to take it down. But they failed to wound even. So yeah,
next time.
Nothing unexpected here. But it would have been a cool thing.
Cool. So main takeaway here from Georg: do not use cultists and melee to take down Custodes dreadnoughts. Officially, not the Warhammer recommendation. Cool. Let's talk about something that can kill dreadnoughts in the Chosen. Can you talk about those? Yeah.
So the Chosen, I have played with a unit of Chosen already for a while now. I started out with like basically Lightning Claw and Chainsword, because at that moment they still get like the maximum amount of attacks, but you're saving basically 3 points per model. So I think having that one attack that is less efficient, but don't pay anything for it, is usually worthwhile the trade. And then I started to put like 1 Thunderhammer on the champ, and later on I put a 2nd Thunderhammer in. And then when Custodes became like so prevalent, I decided, okay, a 3rd one will not harm. So I painted a 3rd one up. Luckily, they're fully magnetized, so it's not hard to swap in another Thunderhammer. So I have now 3 Thunderhammers, 2 Lightning Claws, 2 Chainswords, and they always came down in the Dreadclaw, which allows me to deep strike basically turn 1. And I have to kind of step ahead a little bit. I have basically 3 like big hitter units that are coming in 1 turn 1, 1 turn 2, 1 turn 3. Yeah, most of the time, unless my opponent kind of screens me out and forces me to say something like, okay, yeah, there's no good charge target for me here, then I would try to, like, especially with the warp talents, put them down in behind obscuring in a safe location, and then next turn you fly out and then you kill whatever is needed to get killed, basically. Yeah. And so I spaced this out like really well. So and turn 1, basically the Chosen come down, they use Another Prince to go into a target. They use Veterans of the Long War, and hopefully will be able to kill something. And then turn 2, you use these 2 stratagems for the next unit, and then turn 3 for another unit. And so, yeah, one of the things that I would have loved to have is like an offensive way to do the fight last out.
Yes.
But I mean, the only way would have been to use Bellicor, which is too many points, and also like contrary to the whole list feeling. And the other way would have been File Blightspawn. But I was thinking long and hard about it, but it's just that I need it in an offensive manner. So I want to basically charge with 2 units, and they can't interrupt. And if he moves 5, he's never where he needs to be to prevent that, basically. So he was not in the list at the end.
Okay.
But from the Chosen, maybe I can just go to their partners in crime, which is a unit of 5 Havocs, 3 chain cannons, and 1 rocket launcher. And there's a very particular reason for the rocket launcher, because I have 6 units that are exactly 160 points.
Yeah.
And that's very important, because like that, I can choose to take to the last of my Plague Burst crawlers. If I would have taken the 4th chain cannon, that would be 165 points. And my Havocs never ever survived a single game. So that was very important. And it also gives you like another tech choice. If you have the CP, sometimes doing the 3 mortal wounds to a unit that flies is not the worst thing. And so the thing is, because I come so heavily from Deep Strike, one of the key things is that I need to remove screens, or the ability to screen, from my opponents. And that's basically where the Havocs are king, because they have a lot of shots. You can shoot them twice if necessary. And most screens are T3, maybe T4. Most of the time it's non-existing armor, or maybe a 5-up. Even a 3+ armor, then it's usually only a 5-man unit or something like this. So again, I don't have anything shooting that needs Veterans of the Long War at that moment, so I can use that on the Havocs if needed. And they wound on 2s, and basically on average, they remove most of these screening units, which then allows my second wave to basically come in. And for the Chosen, I actually kept the 2 Lightning Claws still in, especially for that case, because sometimes the Chosen would not be able to get into something juicy because it's all hidden away. But with the 5-man, you can basically space yourself out so that you hit 2 screening units. And then if you use excess of violence, basically the 2 with the Lightning Claws almost pick up a 10-man unit by themselves. So you can remove another 20 screens at that moment, which might be hiding behind a building or something like this. And so that all prepares the stage so that the Warp Talents can hopefully come in and do business that is needed.
So let's go ahead and actually, because part of the reason the Warp Talents were so effective was because of some of the Slaanesh HQs, I suspect. So let's go ahead and jump to that Demon's Patrol and kind of talk about some of the choices you made there and how they interact with the casters.
Yeah, just to finish up, so I had two units of 8 Warp Talents, which again are exactly 160 points. Then I had a mixed Demon's Patrol, which had 2 Heralds, 1 on foot and 1 on chariot. Then 2 units of Nurglings for forward deploying shenanigans, and then 1 unit of Nurgle Furies, because they're just more stable than Furies from Slaanesh. And as you said, the Heralds were really key in 2 things basically that they provide. First of all, they give +1 strength to the Warp Talents, bringing them to strength 5, which is an important kind of key category, because you're wounding suddenly knights or like any vehicle on 5s. And with Veterans of the Long War, it's on 4s, and you're re-rolling all the wounds with the Lightning Claws, so that is pretty efficient if you have like a high volume of attacks. And also against something like Custode troops, it's actually really nice if you can wound on 4s without needing to put Veterans on, because they will anyhow use the transhuman if you put Veterans on. So at least at that moment, you don't need to spend the CP. And the other thing where they helped out the Warp Talents is basically that there is a nice strat in the Demon Codex, Locus of Craze. I think Locus of Craze. And that says that every Slaanesh demon, so basically the Herald itself gets a new aura. And this aura lets every single Slaanesh demon, which my Warp Talents are, get an additional attack on a 6+2 wound. Again, it's 6+, so with Veterans it's 5+. That's why I want to use Veterans at that moment. And so if I'm able to buff them up like completely, basically my warp talents go in, they hit on 2s. Every 5 and 6 is an explosion, because unfortunately they can't take the icon of excess. That would have been much nicer, but still. And so you have like 33 attacks that you start out with an 8-man unit, and you usually hit between like 36 and 44 times, depending on like how good you roll.
Yeah.
And then you wound basically everything at least on a 4. You reroll all wounds, and every 5 or 6 gives you an additional attack. So you start basically at the beginning again. It's not that you can get more attacks with Death to the Fourth everyone, at least on this event it was ruled that way.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure. So there is like a sentence, I think, in the rule book that you can't get extra attacks from something that is an extra attack. Normally it's extra hits that Death to the Fourth Emperor does, but he ruled it in a way that this is also like an extra attack. So
I've looked into this. I think by the rules you're correct, but I understand how if it's one of those things that feels wrong to a lot of TOs, because it sounds like attacks even though they're hits. But yeah, it's one of those things. It's no hard feelings. It's TOs.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Exactly.
I clarified it before just to be sure that I'm not playing it in a way that he would not want it to play, basically.
Yeah, and actually, I'm quickly jump in if that's okay. And just for any kind of newer players watching, sometimes they may be intimidated by a TO or they're unsure how something is rolled. Don't be afraid to ask. The TOs are your friends. They want you to have a good experience. They want your opponents to have a good experience. So if you have any rules questions, you're unsure about how something is going to work out, please always contact the TO ahead of time. They want you to reach out to them, and then everyone wins. Exactly. So yeah, great job doing that. Sorry, I didn't want to jump in.
No, it's a very important thing, and it's like everything that you can clarify beforehand. First of all, helps you with the preparation because you know what to expect. It's not that you rely on this additional thing and then the TO says like, no, that's not how it's working.
Yeah.
And so if you can do that ahead of time, that's definitely a nice thing. So. Yeah.
Cool. So it looks so great. And you're still getting. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So and there's a very particular reason why I have one Herald on chariot and one on foot. So the one on foot always was deep struck together with the warp talents, because that basically allows me to come down anywhere and I have my Herald nearby. And with like the spacing of the bases, if you have 2 warp talents that are within half an inch of your opponent and then half an inch, you have like a second one that just gets you with the base size in the 6-inch aura range. So even if you fail your 9-inch charge with the Herald, they are in range to get all the buffs. The Herald is not protected then anymore. He will be dead next turn, but this is basically what happens to all my units that come in. Because I don't have any durability in Chaos Space Marines at all. They hit like a brick, but they are also like paperweight. And that's why I really can't go in with like 2 units and risk an interruption or something like this, because it's just not possible.
Makes complete sense.
Yeah. And then coming to the last detachment, that's Nurgle detachment, basically. So it contains like a Poxbringer with Fleshy Abundance, which is allowing me to heal my, Nurgle demons for D3 wounds. And there are 3 Nurgle demons basically in that list, which is the Plague Force Crawlers. And then it also contains the Telemann that we started out with. And that's basically the list.
Cool. And so just to clarify, this is one thing that might be obvious to you and I, but maybe to some players.
So I don't get any stratagems of Death Guard. I think that was what you wanted to, exactly. Yeah. So I was working around with like various versions of the list. And at some point I put in basically like a full-blown Death Guard detachment in. And so I had not the Poxbringer, but instead I had like for 20 points more and the Plague Caster, I think it's called.
Yeah.
However, in the end, I decided against it because these 20 points were quite nice to use somewhere else. And also, there are a few nice stratagems for Death Guard that I could have used, like the -1 to hit with the smoke screen, and especially like the flat 3 damage on the mortars.
Yeah.
However, generally speaking, I would say that my CP are best used for the Chaos Space Marine units. And like that, I wasn't even like tempted to use
That makes
them
sense.
somewhere else. So
Yeah.
it was not really a problem. And also the Fleshy Abundance is really a nice thing because, as I said, I took to the last in all 5 games. I would generally take it in most games. So there are a few examples where I would say like, no, they are maybe too good in like killing Plagueburst Crawlers. But like that, it's, yeah, if they shoot at the Plagueburst Crawlers and they leave 1 at 3 wounds, yeah, then you just heal him up for 2 turns, and they basically, after the first volley, didn't kill 1, and then you healed him. And it's like, okay, do I shoot more into it or not? And at that moment, it's, if they don't, they basically wasted the shooting of at least 1 unit for 1 whole turn by not killing something, and they will not kill it in the end. So
and this was what's really interesting, is because I had the exact same thought process, where I used to have a pure Death Guard detachment for my spearhead. But that 3 damage mortar stratagem, it's like a mental trap, because what happens is you spend it when it's selected to shoot, so it's before you roll the number of shots. So you'll spend a CP for the 3 damage, then you'll roll a 1 on the number of shots. You're like, I've already invested a CP, I kind of have to re-roll this, you know? It's just like a whole like cycle where you're spending 1 or 2 CP every turn and getting very consistent results. It's best just, honestly, like as you say, it's literally just a stratagem where you have so many great uses of CP. Don't even play that game.
Overall, I would say that in some games, I wouldn't say like I had leftover CP.
Yeah.
But for me, the thing is, this list is like really oppressive turn 1 to 3 when like the big hitters come in. Turn 4, it's not unlikely that I basically don't have any units left where it's worthwhile to spend CPs. Basically, usually the Master of Execution is coming in for 1 last hooray. And other than that, it's more like, still trying to move block or prevent my opponent from getting points. And at that moment, I'm re-rolling mortar shots, basically. I don't have anything else that is worthwhile to spend my CP on, basically. But yeah.
One thing I'm curious about, 2 small, just little tech questions. Did the 6-inch intervention from the Master of Executions with either a stratagem or as an innate roll for characters, did that ever come into play? Like to protect the plague bursts, or is that just not how it played out?
Not in this tournament.
Okay.
My previous tournament, I had him hiding behind a wall, and 30 Gaunts came charging into that unit of cultists that I had just string out to the thing.
Yeah.
And I heroically intervened. He put like, I don't know, 4 attacks with the guns, but that already gave me like 4 inches of movement or so. And then, as we discussed before, he's really, really good at like picking up horde units.
So that unit evaporates like that.
Exactly. It completely evaporated, and he looked at me and said, like, where am I gone? They are there where my Master of Execution, now very bloody, basically steps out of a mist of bone flesh. And suddenly he's 7 inches closer than he has been before.
Yeah.
So the next turn I moved, I killed a unit of 5 warriors. That was the only time, because he had already lost so many resources that he said like, okay, I need to split. And he didn't split enough. So I was alive on 1 wound. So I went into his 2 neurophobes, killed 1 and put the other one down to a wound. So at that moment, he was really getting his points back. But it's a super nice thing, basically, to extend like a threat range, especially when you have something like 2-3 cultists that just swing out to an objective, and he's within heroic intervention rate. So if my opponent is not shielding those guys off, I'm basically in combat, and then I need to see how the spacing is so that not too many attacks basically can go into him, because he's easy to pick up. He doesn't have an inborn 4 wounds, T4.
Yeah, but that's one of those things. Yeah, for a lot of people ask me like, how does he survive? He's only 4 wounds. He's literally like 2 tactical Marines tied together and had a baby combined. But just
in the end, he doesn't survive. That's just the thing.
Yeah,
but what you need to what you need to create is having like that 1 juicy target, that 1 turn, and then he goes in. And he basically kills.
And no, that's a fantastic piece. And let's see, the last part was so the Havocs, I assume you said they were in the Dreadclaw with the Chosen, right? Or did they?
Except for one game. In one game, I kept them on the board.
Okay. Did you ever start? Good.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, did you ever start a Warp Talon squad on the board and then put them up in Deep Strike if you went second? Just maybe have like, they have to play around the threat that you could advance and charge and then move again with Warp Time. And then you could have like insane, you can have a 42-inch threat range with a Warp Talon squad on the board.
Yeah.
And even if you're not going to do that, did you ever like put them in deployment just to make them play around that? Or is that just always in Deep Strike?
So in the end, I didn't do that. I played around with exactly that thought in like 3 of my test games or so.
Sure.
But I found that, yeah, at that moment, I also had like a pure Slaanesh detachment. So this allowed me to advance and charge.
Yeah, you can't do that.
So my idea was something like, okay, if Tau is deploying on the line, would I be able to say, I put my 2 units of Warp Talents down?
Yeah.
And I have my my chosen coming from Deep Strike. And if I then get first turn, if I advance everybody up and just say like, I go completely ham, how much damage do I do? And unfortunately, it's the easy answer is not enough.
Okay.
And the more complex answer is that once you know what a Warp Talent unit can do, if they have +1 to wound, prescience, and the extra attacks on at that moment 5+.
Yeah.
You don't really want to fight with a unit that doesn't have suppressions or have not Veterans of the Long War. And so if I run with like all 3 units up there, only one of the units can have it. So the other 2 are working with limited capacity. And for me, I figured out that it's just not doing the trick.
Sure.
And then in the end, I was thinking like, okay, as you said, maybe I keep 1 unit, especially together with the Warp Time. But I decided against it in the long term because CP are just money. And there were so many moments where it would be like, okay, it's turn 1.
Mm-hmm.
My chosens are anyhow coming down. My chosen will get my opponent wherever they need to be, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the Warp Talents can fly up and maybe can jump over a screen or so. But at that moment, it's also hard because, they first need to gap completely no man's land. That's usually 24 inches. So they're landing in front of the unit and they need to charge over it and so on. And then again, they're basically competing with the chosen for Honor the Prince, for Veterans of the Long War, for prescience. And for me, I figured out that spacing it out is the best thing. And as the drop pod is less reliant on a warp time, because if you move your Warp Talents out and then you fail Warp Time, and even if you spend the CP, it's still a 6. If you fail it a second time, then you are out in the open, you're trading one of your super fragile but heavy hitter units against nothing. And this is just something that I didn't want to risk in the end. So I went against it. But I tested it out. It can work. It definitely has an impact on a deployment on your opponent's side, but the impact was not that great in my eyes.
That makes sense. And honestly, I honestly hate relying on Warp Time offensively, just because it's a CP thing, because you have to reroll 1 or 2 during the game. But honestly, like even if it's like a 90% chance of the reroll, there's still a lot of times you're just going to fail Warp Time turn 1, and then I don't like that aggressively because then like you have to move them further in the open if they fail and they just die. Whereas like
for me, it's really like a utility piece. It's there to say like, okay, if I need to like fill some gaps in my line somewhere, quite often I Warp Time Cultists basically, because it's like, okay, my Cultists need an advance roll of 5. I rolled only a 3. Okay, do I reroll now? It's still only a 1/3 chance. Let me just do it this way. The front of the Cultist unit goes all the way, and the back strings back to the Sorcerer. And then I roll on a 6. If I'm not making it, then I spend the CP, and then I'm moving up and I'm actually putting not 1 or 2 models on the objective, but it's actually 5 at that moment. It's more for those kind of plays.
And that makes complete sense. I love your mindset. It seems like such a fun toolbox list to play. Anyway, speaking of
it's really nice. Definitely. It was a blast.
Now let's talk about how you scored your points. What secondaries are you picking? Because I have let me put a guess in quickly. Stranglehold to the last, Psychic Interrogation. Is that correct?
Most of the time, yeah.
Okay.
So basically what I wanted to have is, because with all my my armies before, I played mostly, almost Chaos Space Marine pure with the Talaman. So I had like Emperor's Children and then the Talaman in
and a fire
one
raptor.
list.
That was an amazing list.
Yeah, and the Fire Raptor. Yeah, working completely different, but also a lot of fun. And then before that, I had played like a complete T3 5-up Invern Horde list. So I had like 30 Cultists, Night Lords, 90 Demonettes, 45 Bloodletters, and damn it, where was I going? The thing that I wanted to always have is like a safe third secondary. And that was never the case, basically.
Yeah.
But with these point changes, with like Plague Burst Crawlers coming down 15 points for whatever reason, they are amazing. And at 160, they are really good.
Yeah.
And with the Warp Talents also coming down 3 points, meaning I can take 8 of them for 160. I really enjoyed having the possibility to go for to the last. I never was able to build for that before, but it is definitely a nice thing to have. And Plague Burst Crawlers, because they are staying in the back, because you have like a lot of cultists or whatever in between, usually they are surviving. So I lost 2 Plague Burst Crawlers in my 6 games.
Yeah.
In the end. So and I took to the last in all 6. And then Stranglehold, yes, in most missions it's really good. Sometimes you need to be careful if it's a 6 objective mission.
Sure.
And you play against something like super durable, because I don't have like a lot of shooting. It's like incidental shooting.
Yeah.
They can remove stuff from objectives, but it's not always as easy.
And it's like very swingy. Like it can swing in your favor, but it can also swing against you for 2 or 3 turns.
Yeah, exactly. And then Banners is another nice pick that I can do easily. If I have like 2 objectives basically in my deployment zone or under my control from the beginning, that means you basically get like 10 points. And then you raise 1 more with the Furies turn 1, and they are not able to directly take it off, and then you're already at 11. Or so Banners is definitely always a nice option. I can do also retrieve Nagman data with the list, but I generally don't do that. Engage is not so much a thing for that list, I think, because I play more like staying in my half of the board and then missing out my hitters, basically.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, because I have 3 demon characters, which apparently I have forgotten to put their spells in. So the 2 Slaanesh demons had also Hysterical Frenzy, which allows a Slaanesh unit to fight again. In the psychic phase never came up because my units, first of all, hit very hard. So most of the time the opponent was dead. And then the turn afterwards, I was basically dead. And if they ever got the charge off against me, there was nothing surviving.
Yeah, exactly.
To use that. And, but that also means I have like 3 units where I don't really care if I have to give up my spells. So psychic secondaries suddenly became quite interesting. And most of the time it was psychic interrogation, just because the stipulation that you don't need line of sight anymore is actually really nice nowadays. And it also sometimes leads to weird plays where your opponents basically try to hide their characters or stay back with them, which is something that I don't mind. And I have 1 character that is on a chariot. So he moves 12, he advances 46. And this is normally to get him into place where the second unit of Warp Talents without the small herald comes down, so that I can do my full-blown attack there as well. But he can also like easily bridge a gap if my opponent thinks he's safe. Or so. And there was 1 game in particular, a game against Tau, where I specifically opted out not to use mental interrogation or psychic interrogation, but instead I went for ritual. And the reason for that is that ritual is done in 3 turns. I mean, I have 4 psychers.
Yeah.
All 4 were dead at the beginning of turn 4. It's just something that you need to work with Tau. And I mean, I won that game with a single point difference. And so it was really important that I took ritual and not psychic interrogation, because
Sure.
at that moment I would have just had maximum of 9 points.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Speaking of psychic secondaries, did you ever take Pierce the Veil? Because when I saw the Chariot Herald, maybe even on the diagonal deployments, because I've been trying that one, because everyone says it's really bad, but I've play tested it. It's with more pure demons, so maybe more durable. But it's really good if you have like a fast HQ to kind of just reach their board edge against like something like Custodes on diagonal deployments. Do you ever try that? Or
I have not.
what do you think?
So
Okay.
I think with the right list, it's possible. Yes, I would definitely say so. You also need like an opponent that has like maybe a bit of a mobility issue. Then it can become like really a thing.
Yeah.
With this list, again, I usually stay fairly compact and then more like shoot out my missiles or like have like probe attacks. But it's not so much that I want to like send him on a mission where he's basically not coming back. Because if I send him on the mission before the warp talents are down, that's hampering the effectiveness of the warp talents. And if I'm sending him afterwards, most of the time he's not there anymore. So
sure, no, that makes complete sense. No, I love your approach to secondaries. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about, because so many people now, you know, online in tournaments that talk about how unbeatable Tau are, how unbeatable Custodes are. It seems like your list has really cool tech and matchups into both. Can you talk about, I know you beat Tau at the tournament. Can you talk about like how that, a little bit how the game went, but also kind of in general, your maybe tips for beating Tau and how that goes?
Yeah, so I mean, yes, I beat the Tau list. I beat it by 1 point. And I have to say as a caveat,
1 point's a point.
Yeah, it's a point. And the reason why I won is basically because I play Chaos. So the guy came over from Maryland, and he was basically thinking, with this list, I will win the GT. So he took the exact same list that trounced his Custodes 2 weeks before the Cherokee Open. That was the exact same copy of the list that Jack Harpster used to win the Cherokee Open.
Oh, Anthony Birdsong, yeah, around
exactly. Anthony
that amazing game store on the East Coast,
yeah. And he basically came over, and feeling wise for him was like, okay, this is my GT to win in a way. And then in round 4, he hits this weird, odd chaos list. It looks like somebody went into his store and bought like all the boxes of chaos that were there, put them together, put some paint on it, and said like, here you go.
Yeah.
Because it's like such an amalgamation of like units and everything.
Yeah.
And so he didn't give the list any respect at all. Basically, he went first. He killed 20 of my 30 cultists with out of line of sight shooting, exposing a lot of my characters from the beginning. And then, so it's like it's a really, really tough game. What basically my list has advantage-wise is that my units that do damage are not there. They usually are damageable once they have already done the damage. So they come down, they charge, they kill something, and then basically they are not there anymore next turn. And how this game went was he screened pretty good. So he gave me, he gave me the respect needed, I would say. So I came down turn 1, so he went first, killed all my Nurglings, killed 2/3 of my cultists. And I think that was it. And then I basically, at that moment, already had to move up with my one of my Plague Force crawlers behind an obscuring terrain, just to have like a possibility to keep my characters kind of safe.
Yeah.
And I brought down my drop pod with the Havocs and the Chosen. And basically, in a way that I could shoot 1 unit of Crude's dead, a unit of Crude Hound's dead, and I mortared the other 2 units down to a single guy each.
Okay.
And basically, he managed to take morale on one of them. So he had basically 1 dog left and another unit of Crude, screening wise. Okay. And that's kind of really important because you need to create situations where he's basically not able to hide his big crisis units behind screens.
Just to clarify, when you said the Havocs were shooting turn 1, were they in the pod? Were the Chosen also in the pod? Okay,
Yeah.
so what did the Chosen do when the Havocs came out, or did they stay in the pod? Or?
No, they also got out. So both
Okay.
the pod and the Chosen are within 9 inches of his fragmentation crisis unit.
Yeah.
And so the Havocs are also there. They're in a crater.
Sure.
They're getting cover now. They're shooting at the screens, basically.
Okay.
And then my plan is to send in the Chosen into his crisis unit. But the big problem here is he has full hits and wounds rerolled at that moment on that unit. And it was just full hit rolls. I don't know exactly. Anyhow, they have 10d6 shots. So that's like more than 30 shots. And and Chosen are paperweight. So if he's able to use Overwatch, I'm dead, basically, because I will not be able to withstand that firepower. And the issue, normally I would charge out of line of sight. He has no line of sight guns, so that doesn't matter.
It's brutal.
So my way around that was basically, okay, I will have to send in the pod first, because the pod is T6. So all of his shots will wound only on 5s.
Yeah.
And he has 9 wounds, so he should make it in. And if he's not using Overwatch there, then this. And then the other thing is also he has like a -2 to charge possibility. In the end, I charge him with the pod. He decides not to Overwatch, and the pod fails to charge. So at that moment, I can either say, okay, I spend the 1 CP for what I did was I spent the 1 CP for Honor the Prince to bring the pod in.
Yeah.
To stop him from overwatching that Chosen. But at that moment, he says, like, Chosen get -2 to their charge range. I need an 11, and without Honor the Prince, I don't make it. So in the end, the pod kills 1 drone, 2 drones or so. And then afterwards, the Chosen are gone. But this is just something that
they can use the strat while engagement range. I didn't know. I thought it was like, that's unfortunate. That's very.
No. I mean, they have like, it's pretty ridiculous how
it is.
Yeah. So, but at that moment, then his next turn, he basically kills the pod. He can fall back and shoot as well.
Sure.
Ignoring all modifiers.
Of course.
With like one of his commanders.
Yeah.
And so he falls back, shoots with Shadow Sun and some Melters, basically the drop dead, kills all my Chosen, kills all my Havocs.
Yeah.
Decides not to kill my Poxbringer, which was doing Psychic Ritual turn 1, because he has a 5-up Feel No Pain in addition. And instead he kills the Talisman, which was trying to perform the action of the Scouring to get like 3 points on there, because I knew that I need every point.
Sure, that makes
possible.
sense.
And but this is also one of the things, for example, he never did that action. And I would say partly because he was not completely familiar with that list, didn't have like the reps. And secondly, because he was playing Chaos, because he thought like I will shoot him off. He will be completely gone after turn 2 or turn 3 maybe, and that's it. But that was not what happened basically. So so he kills that. And then turn 2, I bring in my first unit of Warp Talents, and my huge problem is I'm not able to get to any of his crisis units. He still has like that 1 unit of 10 fruits, and he has the possibility to just for 1 CP take the drones of a unit and make a new unit out of the drones, and they are perfect to screen again. So he played that very well. So in the end, I went for another play. So I pushed forward with my characters, did another ritual. And because he was coming a bit forward, the Master of Execution with a warp time was basically in line with the commander that allows him to fall back and shoot.
Beautiful.
So that was my play, basically. Send the warp talent into the group and pile into his crisis unit that has all the indirect shots, and they are all blasts, so he would not be able to shoot.
I can't shoot,
Exactly. And then the Master of Execution goes into the commander, that's the plan at least, kills him, and is able to consolidate into his other unit, which is with plasma. They will have to shoot him. They will kill him, of course, but they are not able to fall back and shoot because that commander is not there.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, at that moment, I was only able to do 6 mortal wounds. And with some Tau shenanigans of like, oh yeah, I have a shield rune, I have another drone. I can also put 1 whole damage onto another drone of another unit. Basically, his commander lived with 3 wounds. Because he rolled pretty hard on his 5-up invulns as well.
Sure.
And initially, I thought like, okay, that's basically the game. I had my 1 chance, I went for it, and I still think it's the right play.
Sure.
But what happens in the end is he completely overcommits. So he moves forward with his unit of plasma crisis units without needing to. He kills all the warp talents, kills basically all my characters. All my characters, and has the plasma unit now as the forefront on the middle objective, just touching the middle objective. And so that gave me a leg back in points-wise, because he took to the last as well, which was his 2 big crisis units and the commander that was on 3 wounds only. And so what happened in the end is I'm able to send in my warp talents into the crisis unit and even shoot them before with the plague bow scholars. And that is enough to basically wipe that whole unit. That's 5 points that he loses. And then afterwards he places his commander in such a way that I'm able to get 1 of my plague bow scholars to become the closest at that moment. And so in the end, I have 3 plague bow scholars on 3 different objectives, trying to hold them. 1 was basically save mine because he was too far away. And then the other he contested with 1 of his commanders because he also had like 2 drones. And in his last turn, he shoots my plague bow scholars, kills 1, and puts the other 1 down to, I don't know, a few wounds. And in the end, then we are counting the points. And at some point, I sit there and say like, holy shit, I think I have it. And I look up and his face was like, what? And he had forgotten to give me my 4 points that I would get at the end of my turn, because I would score at the end of my turn. And I went second. And so we calculated it through. He was trying to find some points where he would be able to get like a few more points, basically. But in the game that we played, there were none. But he would have had like plenty of opportunities to basically to go. His downfall was he went for banners, thinking that he could raise banners with his Coot Hounds. But Coot Hounds are beasts, so they can't.
They're not infantry.
So he was only setting up 2 banners, and I was able to get 1 down turn 1, because that was on the middle objective, and that was going back and forth all the time. And so he gets 5 on banners. But there was another opportunity where 1 of his crisis units, with only 2 wounds on 1 crisis unit remaining, shot into a plague burst crawler over, I don't know, 24 inches or so, which is completely useless at that moment. He could have raised the banner there, and then he gets 2 more points, and that's it.
Then that's
the other thing is like he can scan 1 or 2 of the objectives due to the mission rules, which I tried to, but he denied me. He never did that. And the reason for that was, in my eyes, clear, because he didn't expect me to hold on as long as I did and to basically fight for every point. And that is what you need to do against Tau. If you can, put as much into reserves as possible. Use Honor the Prince if you're Emperor's Children. To basically come down and initiate as many trades as possible and try to be as upfront as possible to just deal enough damage so that your stuff can survive somehow. I can't see it in like a pure CSM list. I can't see how you can play that matchup, because you just have nothing that survives. Basically, the Plague Burst Crawlers are just something that they are wounded on 6s only. So even with like full rerolls to wound, it's not clear. And all the plasma shots, when they come down, they reroll all hits or wounds. So reroll wounds on a 4+ is still 75%, but yeah, anything that is not T8, it's on the 3+. And then it in everything of like CSM, it's 3 damage. Against the Plague Boss Crawlers, it's only 2 damage because they reduce it by 1. And yeah, so in the end, my idea, it worked out in a way how I had envisioned it. I would have hoped to kind of clear the screens more effectively turn 1, but he had like still the Croods were basically behind and obscuring a rune, so I had no possibility to get to them.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, it sounds like it was a really well played game by both players. That's just sometimes what happens as games come down to little small.
No. Especially if it's like a 1-point game, then of course there are a multitude of moments where you would say like, okay, if this just rolls out slightly different, or I move a bit different here, then it's another 3 points. So
well, but again, that's one of, as you talked about at the start, it's not even like gotchas per se, but it's just we have a big advantage as cast players because we've practiced against their army many times. No one has ever practiced against your list. I guarantee you, no one was looking at BCP before the tournament saying I have to practice against that. It's like no disrespect to you because you're a very well regarded player, but your list, I agree, to people that aren't aware of all these interactions. It doesn't look like that.
And also, like I would say, it's flattering that you say you have seen my name pop up, but I'm not playing that many tournaments, unfortunately. Because I have like a firstborn, like a 1-year-old now. And life is just life. And so it's not that I'm playing that many tournaments, and it's usually Texas centered these days. And so there are definitely people that know my name, but if you come from Maryland, at that moment, it's just like another random chaos guy or whatever.
Well, part of it was, part of it was I connected with Russell Tassin, who's obviously an amazing cast Space Marines player down in Texas. We threw your name around.
The unfortunate thing is I played him round 3, so he was playing Necrons this time.
Oh, you played Russell? Oh, how'd that go?
I played
Russell. Like a ton of fun to play with.
I play him almost every Tuesday. So it's really a shame that we needed to play on the tournament as well to get one of us kicked down. So
Cool. That's off the message him afterwards and congratulate him on having a fun round 3 opponent.
Definitely.
We talked about Tau, and I agree with you 100%. Like literally any chaos list I'm running, or any cast Space Marine list I'm running, any infantry on foot are entirely out of the list. Nothing can start on the board that isn't a vehicle, which is unfortunate. I think it's very sad because a lot of the iconic units and play styles, but I mean, it is what it is. As you say, you can't wish things were different, just accept what they are. Let's talk about Custodes, because I want to double check. I think you played them round 4 or something, or maybe
I played them round 2, round 2. Okay, 4, that's right. 4 was 6.
Yeah, 4 was the Tau. Okay,
so I was able to best them twice, and then the third time scattered. I think the Custodes matchup is rough for my list, and the 2 reasons is just like they are able to negate basically all my real the damage that I need to do. They can just negate for 1 CP. So it's just like stopping all rerolls with lightning claws. So these warp talents can get like a horrendous amount of damage, especially because I can reroll my wounds, and every 5+ is an additional attack. So I can fish for additional wounds, basically. So I would have loved to face Crusher, for example. In the end, a Crusher list won, and I would have had such a good matchup in my eyes into any Crusher list, because it's like there were a few Harridans. I think I'm one of the few persons that was not afraid to face a Harridan. Because I know that 1 unit of warp talents fully buffed takes something like 28 to 46 wounds out of a Harridan. And it has 34, but he's going down in 1 activation if I'm just rolling average, I would say. I'm not exactly sure, but I have rolled it out a few times. And so for me, that would have been a matchup I would have loved, because all of their defenses is basically useless against my stuff, apart from the mortar. So the mortar is 2 damage. There, the -1 damage would actually be really impactful. But I'm just not shooting the damage, the mortar at any monsters. I'm shooting that at the warriors that don't get
and the Hive Guard, Hive Guard, if you're don't have
Hive Guard
damage.
So whatever. Yeah. Exactly. And then the D3+3 damage, if it's D3+2 damage, it's still enough to get through in that case.
Yeah,
and yeah, so I then transhuman to only wound them on 4s. I have strength 8 only, so it means only, but I have strength 8 weapons basically, or strength 5 weapons with +1 to wound. Both is 4s against T8 mods already. So the Tyranids matchup is something where I think I'm really favored, especially because all these crusher lists don't have the ability to screen out my units that come in, so I can send them in where I want them to be, basically. So I played it twice, once in a test game, and it was basically like, I pick where I want the next unit to disappear. It disappears. Then my unit disappears as well, but I traded at that moment 160 points against something like 280 or whatever. But yeah, unfortunately, I was not allowed to play against Crusher, but I played against Custodes 3 times. And as I said, they're blocking revolts. They have transhuman, so the chosen with the strength 8 weapons, or also like the plague push crawlers with the entropy cannons and the mortars, are all running on 4s only, which is just really, really, really annoying. And initially, when I thought about the whole matchup and basically just theorized about it with a friend, I was really horrified about that thing, because it's like it's all in their hands. So basically, where they turn off rerolls and make me only wounding on 4s, I can't do anything against it, basically. And the whole strategy of like, oh, I'm sending in one single melee combat unit, like that's really doing a lot of damage, is problematic, because at that moment it's like, okay, I know where you're fighting. I have these 2 CP here. Should I use 1 or 2? That's kind of the question. It's not the question as like, oh, where do I use it? It's more like, okay, whatever. So I basically have like, if I'm able to charge 2 units at the same time, I might be able to get like half of my attacks with like how they are supposed to go through. And then the other thing is like everything has a 4-up invent, and 4-up invents are like, they can always spike in one direction or the other. And what I basically need to hope for at that moment is that they spike in the direction that helps me a little bit at some point. But so coming back to Russell, he actually has also a Custodes army, and he came over to my place to play that matchup. And so for him, it was like really helpful, because he had played it against another person. Funny enough, the guy that I played in round 5. And so he had lost with his backgrounds against it, and it was more like for him, okay, if I play the list, I might not play it 100% perfectly, but I see where the flaws are or whatever. And so we were trying to work out this kind of together. And for me, it was nice to see that I have like the advantage in numbers, like really in numbers. So yes, Custodes are super durable and they are super killy and whatever, but for me, it doesn't matter whether I got shot by a 2 damage weapon or not, because everything has only 1 wound, basically. And so what I learned from that match is basically that any damage that you get through, every model that is dead, is something that hurts the Custodes player, because they don't have a lot of models. And if you are able to negate their bikes in a way, that helps a lot, because then the mobility is basically gone. And so in my first game, I played against 7 bikes, or 2 units of 3, and 1 shield captain. And he massively overextended with his bikes. So I was basically able to retaliate only into his bikes with my full army, and I was able to kill all 6.
You'll win that.
And at that moment, he was just rushing me forward, and it took me until bottom of 4 to actually break his advance. At that moment, it was just like, okay, all the units were wiggled down to like 1 or 2 models. had maybe already some runes in addition.
Yeah.
And so when at that moment I had not deep struck my chosen turn 1 because he had like all these Alaris terminators that were like super good in like screening me out.
Yeah.
And so I had only put the Dreadclaw turn 3 down and waited basically with the chosen to then advance and charge. And that was basically when suddenly all of his units disappeared like crazy. And in the end, Trajan was there with 2 units left, and he had like half a unit of warp talents in his on his own objective and so on. So that was the first one that I won with like something 80 to 58 or so.
Very nice.
And then the second game against Custodes, that was also the one that was on stream. So War Games Live, just shout out to. And they're basically the game decisive factor was that he took to the last against me. So his 2 bikes and the shield captain were to the last targets.
Yeah.
And he basically still needs to use them. And normally it's not as much of an issue because you can use them until 1 bike is left, and then you're just hiding that bike somewhere. But you don't hide from Plague Burst crawlers. No. And the mortars are actually quite nice into Custodes bikes because they don't get cover. So you bring them to their minus 4 up invuln, and then you do 2 damage a pop. That's not too bad. And so I baited. It was a bit of like a baiting back and forth. So Mike is a good friend of mine. It was the first time that we actually played each other. Cool. And so I was able to kind of lure him out into the open with 1 unit of my Nurglings. So one of his bike unit was kind of exposed slightly before the infantry. And that's really important because Custodes have this really annoying strat called Tanglefoot Grenade. Yeah. Which is actually quite good against Honor the Prince. Because a 9-inch charge, if they roll a 3, or a 4, it's not possible to do it.
Well, it doesn't work against fly, is the big advantage of Warp Talons over
exactly, but the chosen is the key thing.
Oh, the chosen, that would be an issue.
Yeah, exactly. So the chosen were able to come in turn 1 outside of 12 inches of his infantry, but within 9 inches of his
That's the way to do it.
Bikes. And so at that moment, I put questions on the chosen. They have an icon of excess. So normally they have exploding 5s. Then all the Thunder Hammers explode still on 5s because you had plus and minus 1 to hit. Yeah. And I go into his bikes. I rolled something like 7 damage, I think. And he rolls his 4 ups and rolls 5 times a 1, 2, and 3. Then he spends 1 CP to re-roll one of those. Makes it, but still that's 2 dead bikes
right
from
there,
the chosen. And then the lightning claw attacks took another 3 or 4 wounds from the last bike. But that means one of his to the last target is suddenly at 1 or 2 wounds. Yeah, and he can't hide from my mortars. So at that moment, I'm already kind of ahead on points. Yeah, he also went first, played rather conservatively, which means I have like bottom of 5 also to score more points. Yeah, and so
that makes complete sense.
A little bit with like his unit of Sisters of Silence, which were holding an objective in the back. Yeah, and you needed to do like the action on that objective all the time. It was like data's.
Yeah, the one you keep scanning your back objective or something. Yeah.
Exactly that one. And so he kind of positioned his models in such a way that if I want to shoot my Plague Burst crawlers, I need to basically move up. And I did that stupidly, not remembering that he had a Dreadnought in his Deep Strike. So by moving up or by pulling me forward, like very well played on his side, suddenly there is like this murder machine in my backyard. And so he makes the 9-inch charge. A bit of luck there on his side. But luckily for me, I make 4 out of 5 5+ invulns on the Plague Burst crawler, so he only brings it down to 3 wounds. And then, so what I had to do in that game basically was to try to mitigate his Dreadnoughts a little bit. And I tried it with like move blocking. So at one point, you had like 10 cultists basically making a ring around that that Galatus dreadnought.
Yeah.
And kind of, it almost looked like they wanted to summon a demon through that.
Beautiful.
Through that thing. Yeah. And then we had also the story where the one wounded Achilles went into the Cultist. And yeah, really nice game. If you can watch it, I think it's a pretty cool one. Was also very well received from like the comments and everything. And yeah, so I win that game. And then, so like after the 4th round, there were 6 undefeated left.
Yeah.
Which was 4 Custodes, 1 Crusher Stampede, and then myself.
And then you.
Exactly. And then the first game I faced my friend with Custodes. I win that game. And at that moment, undefeated is left 1 Custodes, the Crusher, and me. Yeah. And I got paired down in like in another Custode that was 5 and 1. And I would have loved to play basically the Crusher, like the trifecta of like Crusher, Cow, and Custodes, like round. And literally, I think that I would be, my chances would be much higher. And at that moment, I was pretty drained because it was like at that moment, the first game, 57 to 56 against Tau. First time that I faced Tau. I mean, I have heard a lot about Tau. It is true. It's amazing how fast everything just disappears. It's crazy. And then the second game was also like really demanding and taxing. And then I faced another Custodes list, this time emissaries. Very interesting tech choice. I think actually I like it more than Empress Chosen. But and he has 10 bikes instead of the 7 that I had faced before. And he has somebody with a stupid thing called Praetorian Plate. And he basically picks instead of the 2 I learned something about that that I didn't know before, and I will not forget it. And instead of 2 the last, he's taking Grind, which is the much better pick at that moment. So emissaries have like a pre-game move. And he told me like, hey, I can move 14 inches. And then I move another 14 inches and I asked him like, okay, why do you play emissaries at the beginning? And he said like, basically because one of my units will charge your turn 1. Yeah. And I have 2 units of Nurglings, which can prevent forward pre-game moves. However, we are playing on this map where you basically like the deployment zones are from the middle of the long one to the corner. So it's not like hammer and anvil. It's not hammer and anvil, it's not a Dawn of War, but it's like this mixed thing. Yeah. And hammer and anvil, 2 units of 3 Nurglings completely block everything off, pretty much. They are not able to.
No, that's much worse.
So, exactly. Yeah. So in the end, what I thought was like, okay, I will again try to bait him. So I have a unit of cultists only on my objective, where basically, so my cultists were blocking all the lower ends of the board so that he could not pre-game move there, but he would be able to pre-game move to the complete upper end. And then with 14 inches, he would be able to shoot at my Plague Wave Crawlers and charge into the cultists. Yeah. And so he does exactly that. Shoots into my Plague Wave Crawlers and completely misses. Doesn't even wound with a single one, which is not unlikely with 3 shots only, wounding of force. But I'm jubilous at that moment. If I don't even need to heal him, perfect. He kills the cultists as expected. Sure. And then he piles into a wood, like a forest, which I initially thought like, damn it, now he's -1 to hit. I'm like speaking with him on Messenger now. Yeah. And he told me I have also a strat for a 6-inch consolidation. So he would have ended up in that forest anyhow. Yeah. But I still say like, okay, I have 2 smites. I have a few grenades for my characters. Yeah. And I have 3 Plague Wave Scholars, all easily able to make line of sight. I don't need to expose too much. I bring down my drop pod, have the Havocs in a building so that they can shoot out of the building. Yeah. And the Chosen ready to go into his 2nd unit of bikes that just touch the middle objective to get Stranglehold.
Yeah.
So I put a few cultists on the middle objective so that I can get stranglehold. My Furies fly over in such a way that they are like 3.5 inches away from the
Yeah, so
bikes.
they can't intervene. Yeah.
Exactly, they can't hit them. That was my thought process. They are emissaries, so only 6+, feel no pain against mortal wounds.
Mhm.
So 2 smites could already be like 1 dead bite.
Yeah.
That was the thinking. In the end, I do a single damage because I failed to do 1 smite, and the other one does 1 damage.
Oh no, that's not good.
Then I shoot all my Plague Crawlers into them. He makes every single 4 up against an entropy cannon, apart from 1 single one. And at that moment, I had wiggled down the first bike down to 1 wound.
Yeah.
So hey, my big cannon killed, took like 1 wound off instead of doing like a whole bike.
Yeah.
More or less by itself. In the end, I shoot everything. I even use the Havocs. They're not shooting out to the unit in front, but they're shooting backwards on these 3 bikes. But I'm just not able to kill him. He's just rolling good. I'm not rolling good. Whatever.
Yeah.
So now I'm in a huge predicament because at that moment, yes, I have my Master of Execution basically in charge range to the spikes, but I also want to charge the bike unit on the objective front with the Chosen, because otherwise he's just killing the Chosen and I have not achieved anything.
Yeah, exactly.
And he has like this Praetorian Blade. So my idea, so how I understood it up to that point was that in my end of my charge phase, he basically can heroically intervene to a unit that is in close combat. That was how I understood it.
Yeah.
And so in the end, I opted to not charge with my Master of Execution because that would have put him in charge range.
Yeah.
And then he can bring down his OBSEC model, which would then get this objective away from me.
Yeah.
And that was like the priority target objective. Because I had 5 Furies basically on the edge against his 2 bikes at that moment. And no, it was only 1 bike because the other one was not on the objective at that moment. But even if he would pile in with both on the objective, it would still be 4 models and I'm 5 models, so it's good. But if he comes down with the Praetorian Plate, suddenly he's OBSEC and then it's not good anymore. Yeah. I charge with my Chosen into the unit. That works out fine. And then he uses his Praetorian Plate anyhow, because you don't need to be in close combat to actually make that move. That was what I didn't know. So he just needs to be able to come down to one of his units within 3 inches and needs to end up in close combat. So what happens is
really
3.5 inches away is more than enough to put his super big base next to the remaining bikes that shouldn't be there anymore.
Yeah.
And kills my Furies, takes that away. I'm not getting Stranglehold. I'm not getting my priority objective. And my Chosen go into his his bikes. Remember last time I did 7 wounds and he failed 5. This time I did 4 wounds and he failed none.
That's just life for Custodes players. I swear, Custodes players, they all get together and they share some dice and they just never fail 4-ups in chemo.
Yeah, no, but that's the thing. I mean, in that matchup, I need them to. I mean, there's definitely discrepancy between these codexes that we are using.
Sure.
And yeah, it shouldn't been at that moment. So then in his second turn, he basically, because he had Assassinate, he kills 3 of my characters, which were exposed with the Praetorian Plate guy and with the 2 bikes remaining.
Sure.
Then I need to bring down my warp talents in my own lines to basically clean up these 2 units. And from then on, it's basically that he said, like, I know that I'm ahead. I'm about to score 100 points. So he completely fell back, said like, yeah, you can mortar me if you want to. That's not really doing enough damage. We traded on the midfield objective back and forth. I tried to make one last push in the end, but shouldn't be. And so I lost 100 to 83. So a high scoring loss, but still a loss.
Yeah.
And that meant because the Crusher won his last game, so the other 2 were both undefeated. So one of them would be thing. But luckily, we were using Wind Path. meaning that the 3 persons that were undefeated after 5 rounds would get their first loss. So 1 or 2 would get their first loss in the 6th round, and that would trump basically everybody that had a loss early. So I could have been maximum 3rd at that moment, but because that Custodes player, instead of like, he basically didn't match up well into the Crusher. So I would have loved to face the Crusher. He hated to face the Crusher.
I know, right? Yeah, Crusher can do some work in Custodes.
Yeah. He lost something like 100 to 14 or so.
Yeah.
And so my 83 points were easily enough to basically secure the 2nd place.
Cool. No, and that makes complete sense. I love WinPath as a scoring system.
I actually like
really nice.
that. I would personally prefer the combination.
Okay.
Something like where you say like whoever is undefeated in the last round should not fall down behind somebody that is had his loss earlier.
Yeah.
However, I think for everybody else, it's maybe not a bad thing if you can actually do something. Because if you lose your first game because you play against the winner of the tournament, let's just assume that.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a super tight game, but he wins and you loses. Then it's like, I can maximum get like, I don't know, 46 or so.
Yeah.
And how much fun is that for you at that moment if after the first game it's already clear that you basically don't need to play further if you were expecting to maybe go for top 10 or something like this.
Yeah, at that point you go grab a beer, you go to the local casino or something and do something else.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense.
That's why I would like have the combination, but I had it already in like the T3 spam list with 5 Inven. I basically lost on the top table round 5 against the only one that there were 2 more undefeated. So I played Sean Naden, lost on the top table, and I ended up coming in like 7th or 8th. And that also doesn't feel right.
Which is unfortunate. Agree.
No, exactly. So I really like the win path, especially for like the last thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure whether there's like the perfect solution, but for me, like the combination of it would be as close to perfect as possible.
Yeah, I like the way some places do where they split off to a top 8 at the end for the final 3 rounds. So then, like if you're like undefeated close to the end, you're guaranteed a top spot. But there's still you have to play well. And that makes complete sense. And I just have to say this is like such a beautiful story because a lot of people are so down on chaos, so down on many armies that are much better than chaos. They're like, oh, Tau and Custodes feel like insurmountable, and you're showing it's not true. Before I let you go, I just want to
I would definitely say it is true. It's a lot of work to get them down.
But
fair. I would not say that. I mean, complaining and lamenting doesn't help. It's just as easy as that. Try to put your head down. Think about it. Maybe you got thrown a bone because suddenly Blackbird Scholars are 15 points cheaper and Warp Talents are 3 points cheaper. And then you even pay like the premium of 2 points more expensive Nurglings. So there are tools and ways around. And just try to find possibilities basically to increase your chances. Because I would not say that I'm able to beat all Tau players. It's just there's a clear difference in the power of the different codexes. But there are ways where you can surprise still, and that's
fair. Because I feel like the Tau and Custodes are the big top dogs. I guess Harlequins are coming up next. But I feel like every time I play Custodes, I feel like I look at a Custodes list, I'm like, I feel I can beat this, I can't play this. But there are some Tau lists I look at where I'm just like, I want no part of this. So I think Tau are way stronger than Custodes. I don't know if you agree. I feel like Tau are an entirely different tier up. I'd like the higher levels.
So I would say,
What do you think?
I think you can say it like this. With this list in particular, I actually, if I have like a weaker Tau list in front of me, I like to play rather a weaker Tau list than a weaker Custodes list. Because the Custodes list is like the floor is like super high, but the ceiling for Tau is much higher, I think, than Custodes. Because I mean they have more units and they have definitely some rules that are questionable. I just hope that they are abusing both indirect and bodyguard to such an extent that then in April we will get actually both rules addressed on like a global scale. because bodyguard is working in a way that it should never work. And having the ability to just say, I don't mind where you are standing, I will shoot you anyhow, should not be there, or it should not be spammable, or I don't know. There are various nice suggestions out there. I know that Ziegler said something like a spotter keyword or something like this, so that you can only fire indirect if somebody else can see that unit also.
Yeah, lots of options.
Possibilities to adapt around it. But I mean, the issue with indirect is just that a universal tool that every single army has against every other army is basically to say, hey, if you can't see me, I'm alive in a way.
Exactly.
And if you delete that to such an extent that it's not only like, oh yeah, there's this one unit that 3 Plague Burst Crawlers shot at, and maybe this unit lost 4 guys and the last one is running, but instead you have something like 10d6 shots with rerolling hits and rerolling wounds, and they're only hitting on 4s, but it's not.
No, that's for sure. Well, before I let you go, I did want to talk about kind of the future of Chaos right now as you see it, because I think right now we agree we're kind of not in a great place, but there's still a lot of jank. What are some other Chaos builds you think could be successful? Because I've been playing a lot of Disciples of Be'lakor. I think they're very underrated. I don't know if you've played. It's kind of your stocks. Remember you said you play like the Demon Horde spam with the invulns with the Cultists and the Demons. That's really cool. How do you feel about Disciples, maybe some other Chaos builds? Because I kind of feel like Plague Burst Crawlers, like literally any list with Plague Burst Crawlers is good. Like there's no reason not to run them in any list you can.
Yeah,
right.
I would definitely say so as well. So Plague Burst Crawlers are right now really, really great.
Yeah.
I think if you extend Plague Burst Crawlers further, the Death Guard Demon Engines list can be something interesting, especially if you pair them maybe with Epidemius.
Yeah.
Or summon Epidemius, because at that moment you guys just become more durable. And in the end, what is Death Guard? Death Guard has a 5-up invuln and a -1 damage all the way around. And there's another army right now. Of course, it is much more mobile. That's the thing why Crusher Stampede is something different than a Death Guard Demon Engines list. But I think that is something that could work right now. The issue would be that everybody is trying to prepare for a similar archetype already.
Yes.
I still have the feeling that there should be some Thousand Suns list out there that.
I think there's
so real potential. I really love like the Cult of Time list that Liam Hackett in Australia played.
Yeah.
That sounded like. Yeah, it's too passive for my personal style, I would say, although I try to calm down a little bit.
Yeah, you love Slaanesh, you love the aggression.
Exactly, and sometimes it's too much aggression, and then I'm on the other side of it.
Yeah.
But that was definitely a nice thing, but it's not easy to pilot. So I played against Cult of Time in round 1, and I was actually horrified of that matchup when I scanned through the lists before, because I have so many 1 damage weapons. Yeah. And it's like, it is a thing. If you get +1 armor against it, it's
like free storm shields everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. But at that moment, I mean, the Master of Execution came in clutch, and the Plague Burst Crawlers as well. It's literally also like the Plague Burst Crawlers are giving you some tools that I just didn't have before. And one thing that I would have done next time, if I have like a unit of bikes in a forest in my deployment zone, basically. I only remembered it after the game, but we have a really nice spell called Death Hex.
Death Hex, yeah.
And I have for the time that I played, I basically never used Death Hex, because Chaos Space Marines has barely any unit that has enough AP to make it really worthwhile. However, Plague Burst Crawlers have Emperor Cannons, and they are -4.
Yeah.
And so if he's standing in the woods and suddenly he's saving on 6s instead of 4s, that might have been enough to actually take those bikes down.
That's fair. Not even Custodes players can roll 6 up at a time.
No.
Well, they'll come close. No, that makes complete sense. We'll see. We think Epidemius lists are good. We think I think Thousand Suns really great.
Thousand Suns, there is something. I don't know. I'm only in the starting process of like basically building up my Thousand Suns forces. As I said, I started with Slaanesh, and now I'm expanding into all the other gods basically.
Fantastic.
But as you said, also I think Be'lakor definitely has play. Weirdly enough, I think also the with Custodes being around, the Keeper Rush is also something that is coming back.
Okay.
In a way. So because Keeper Rush also, if you go first against Tau, you have the speed to be there. So what I tried that one game, okay, can I use my warp talents with like plus D6 and having like a character around, and are they able to connect basically?
Yeah.
And those guys can. So I'm not sure whether it should be like complete Slaanesh, because I really think that having a few Nurgle links that just prevent all the crews from pre-game moving,
it changes
is something like really nice to have, especially if you then have afterwards suddenly these huge greater demons racing through the gap that the Nurglings created. So I think that there could also be something. And they are also pairing up really nicely into Custodes, because they have like 10 attacks each, and each of them is a dead Custode guy. And there are not many Custodes running around. They have like 30 or so. So if you're killing like 1 or 2 units, then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, 1/5 is already dead. So
exactly.
let's go for the rest of it. So
I remember when I remember I haven't played Keeper Rush versus Custodes with the new codex, but I remember the previous codex, which kind of a lot of the same principles apply. Like Custodes were almost a buy rush for me, because keepers would come in, then the -1 attack core, and they never kill us, and we kill them eventually. We just move on to the next unit. I think there's a lot of possibility. I think Harlequins are probably looking pretty bad for that, but we need to get more into them. After we're done, probably next couple weeks, I'll bounce some Thousand Suns list around with you, because I've been playing with 2x10 Terminator bricks, and it feels really good in the town. Like I almost feel like I have the advantage, which I know is not true. I know their army is better, but I feel like we have all the tools. They don't really have mortal wound protection. They don't really have AP2 is really good until like all their 4-up bones or drones. But there's a lot of cool options. And I think again, what you're showing is that a creative player, even with like chaos kind of in a rut right now, there's always options. And once we get this Demons Codex, and once we get this new Chaos Space Marines Codex, which I know is still annoyingly far away, but it's going to happen eventually. Georg, I can't wait to see what you cook up once we get actually some 9th edition rolls, because you're already making some of these 8th edition thing.
I think that
good data sheets. Wow, watch out.
The 8th also has like the advantage that Nick Suping is not. I'm not losing anything.
Yeah, that's right.
I start with my Chaos Space Marines, so of course the Death Guard, they lose their -1 toughness, but I never start out with Death Guard, so I'm not losing anything. And I think that is something that I hope they will keep, is like at least some interbook synergies, because I really love to combine like demons and Chaos Space Marine demon and basically demons. That's how it all started, with like demon engines and then possessed, and then
No, that makes sense.
but I think that is also something that I will keep in mind for sure. Like even if the books come out and the powerful, like the doctrines or whatever, is really powerful bonus, it's not necessarily that I need to have that. So I try to keep my mindset like, okay, is like the increased toolbox that I have by souping maybe more beneficial than like getting like this single faction bonus. And most likely it depends, which is exactly where we want to be. There should be like good reasons why you play a certain codex just by themselves, and there should be reasons why you say like, hey, for this particular thing that I want to do, I will actually give up the bonus and just say. What I would personally love is if you get like a Chaos Space Marine bonus, and you get a Chaos Demon bonus if you play them singly. And then if you mix them, but you're mono god, you get a different bonus. I would love that, but I don't see it actually. So.
Well, we'll see. Or maybe at least, I think the very least, like, it should be a rule that like if you're like a word bearers, like the very least should have like a role that they can bring a demon's detachment without breaking their mono faction, or something that's like very thematic. Because like again, as competitive players, we do love like look for a lot of like strong options, but I also want like fluffy players, like maybe someone who like loves Night Lords at their local club. I want them to get some benefit for playing mono faction too, even if we don't want to use that. Because again, one of the things I love is that I talk to cast players, and I'll talk like a Grey Knights player. I'm like, why are you playing Grey Knights? And they're like, oh, I have a good matchup into XYZ. I talk to a cast player like you, and you're like, oh, I read the first Heretic. Talk to Russell, and he's like, oh, I read the Black Legion series. Or, I fell in love with Slaanesh and read a lot of the old world and fantasy lore. So yeah, again, we're gonna keep winning games. We're gonna keep waging the long war, as they say, and I can't wait to see what you do in the coming months as we get some new books. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today, because obviously you're super knowledgeable.
Thank you.
Also,
passionate. Like a really nice discussion. I have to say, you were very well prepared with like your questions and so on. So you were touching a few already before I actually came to the point that I would be talking about it. Meaning like, you had like all the right thoughts already.
Well, what I love is, because I do feel like there's a very small pool of people in the entire world that are really playing Chaos at this sort of level. So anytime I get a chance to talk to someone like you or Russell, for example, it's a real treat for me too, and I want to make sure I know what's going on. But yeah, thank you so much. And I'm sure we're gonna talk again in the future when you win or place highly at some other GT or major.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Maybe we both meet at a final table one day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would also not mind to meet you at any other table, but if we need to face off against each other, then it's always better to face off on the final table and not like somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, well, Georg, thanks so much again. And every Warhammer listener and reader, thank you so much for staying with us today. Super fun discussion, and best of luck for the rest of the season.
Okay. You as well.
Have a good evening. Bye.